And we're live. Well, today I have with me TJ Pitre. He's the founder and CEO of Southleft. And thanks for coming on the show, TJ.
Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Awesome. Well, the place I always like to start these conversations is understanding or learning what made you venture into the agency space in the first place.
All right, let's get into it. So, I guess the quick story would be I've always been I guess my career trajectory took me to the specific realm of web development and design called front end web design and development, and then I was working for Martha Stewart back in 2012 or so, and I was the director of front end development there. Lived in New York for a little over 5 years, and then decided that it was time to move back home. I live in New Orleans now, and 6 months, put up like, hey, I'm gonna head out of here and try to do my own thing. At that point, I thought I was just going to be freelance, and then I left there, and it seemed like I had a nice nest of network folks that all kind of like worked around in the same digital publication industry that I could work with. Ended up leaving there, coming back home. Martha ended up signing on as my first customer for an entire year at about 40 hours a week. So I mainly in my first year of Southleft did similar work that I was doing when I just left Martha, and then after that signed on for another 6 months at about half the amount of time because I needed to like bring in other types of clientele and do other types of projects. And that worked out pretty well. And I did a lot of lifestyle publications, still do a lot of lifestyle publication type sites here. And then the longer story is I've always been into illustration and graphic design. I always thought I was going to be a comic book artist. And so my background is mostly in art and digital design. Graduated with a degree from Tulane in multimedia design, and then started doing stationery packages and logos and branding and all that. And then that kind of like parlayed into one of the clients that I had at the time was asking, oh, can you make me a website too? And I was like, yeah, of course I can. I had no idea how to make a website. But back then I had Macromedia, all that, we had Freehand and Fireworks and Dreamweaver. And with those tools, I could do anything. So I drew up some stuff in Fireworks, exported it into Dreamweaver, and then from Dreamweaver, put it somewhere to host it, and she loved it. And then I enjoyed the process. Wasn't a whole lot of coding involved back then because it was mostly just like slicing up a JPEG and putting it in tables. But after a while, I got my hand sturdy and started to do a lot of coding, and eventually started to land jobs like actual jobs, like as an intern, and then another agency, and then another places like their main web developer, and that kind of led me towards the Martha track.
Awesome. Well, you already mentioned this, but essentially your first client was Martha because you already had that connection. When you had to go get kind of your first client that you didn't already have in your network, how did you approach kind of your, I don't know, getting that first client kind of all on your own?
Yeah, great question. I have to think back, but I know it has to do with the network of people that I worked with when I was living out in New York. So like in the digital media, digital lifestyle, digital media company industry in New York, there was always kind of incestuous. It was like Scripps Network and Viacom and Hearst and Condé Nast and all these different publications, Time Inc., Meredith. There was lots of people who came into Martha from these organizations, lots of people who left these organizations to go to those, from Martha to those organizations. So when it came down to me like putting out the news that I was going to be doing this like full time, I had already emailed a bunch of people and just let them know, keep me on your radar if you ever need any work in the front end realm coming up. So like all the while in that full year of doing the Martha work, I was still maintaining all those connections. and then doing little freelance jobs, like taking on more work. I was doing the 40 hours a month, 40 hours a week to make sure that that was all taken care of, because that was kind of like the majority of my income was all coming from that one client, which
Yeah.
is a huge no-no. And but then I was really doing like 75 hours a week because I would still take on as much as I could, and I knew it was an opportunity that I couldn't say no to, because it was like I'd rather put in the effort when I'm relatively younger, and then gain as much clientele as I can and explore new technologies while I can. Because when I was working at Martha, it was really just kind of a standard code base and one product or a couple of products that we had worked on. Now I had the ability to like test out new frameworks and other methodologies. So yeah, it was mainly the network of people that I had just kind of announced that I'm going to go do my own thing, and let me know if you guys need any help with anything. And then that's kind of we still work with that model a lot. I mean, we've expanded our lead gen and business development methodologies here and there, but a large portion of the type of work that we do right now is through the beautiful network that we are, the peers within this network that we're in.
Yeah. Well, I guess maybe to that point, what advice would you give to other agency folks about kind of maybe their about building their network, about kind of, I guess, approaching it in the right way so that they have a strong network that they can turn to when they need to?
Um, I wish I could say I had a template for how it worked, but I can tell you what I did and what worked for me, but I don't know if it'll work for everybody, because things were different 13 years ago, and a lot of it has to do with like personality and like how much drive and hustle you have in that moment. But the majority of the people that I work with today in the network that I was able to kind of work my way within, or just have form around me, and or me being a part of it, or however networks get created, was not necessarily through work, but like what happens after work. It was there's people that you just kind of like bond with while you're at work that don't really feel like colleagues as much as they kind of feel more like friends. And then so over time you start to establish a rapport with these people, and then like Thursday, Fridays after work, you end up at happy hour at a bar or a restaurant or over coffee or something. And it was those like friendships that blossomed into like trusted relationships. And then from those trusted relationships, it was like, I already know you do good work on the with the front end because I work with you. And then now that person may have left and gone someplace else, and then now that we're still communicating because we're friends, and then they're like, hey, I think I have a thing that would work out well for you. And then all of a sudden there's a job they would throw my way. So I guess the most exact way to do it is uh, uh, reach out, like just be out there. Conferences were really big. Pre-COVID, there was a lot of industry people that I would meet through conferences, and then the after hours things that would happen there, and and yeah, and work. And then a lot of it came from back, like I was just talking about this earlier today. Like when we would have kickoffs with clients and stuff, we would go to their workplace, and then we do the workshops with them and everything. And then from that point on, it was kind of a similar situation. We would talk, do the workshops, and then go out and have drinks and chat later on, and then be humans with each other for a while instead of like business client relationships.
Yeah.
And then those clients turn into referrals for other clients, and then that ripple effect happens.
Yeah. I think the whole, like really just getting to know people, not as like as business counterparts or something like that. I know that I've talked with former colleagues where they ended up coming home with multiple leads because they were just like showing family photos to somebody at the bar who happened to be somebody who would be a good fit, not because they were talking business. It was just like they were talking life, and then the last thing that was like part of the end of the conversation was like, oh yeah, and I do this, and they're like, oh really, like we should chat more. And so it was totally organic, and it was more about just like just making good conversation um, about life, and the business thing just kind of happened to overflow out of that.
That's 100% accurate. And if you go into it without any like pretense, like if you're going into the conversation with the person about trying to sell, most people are going to sniff that out. But if you're just going into the conversation because there's some like commonalities and things that you're that you like together, and you're bonding as like friends, and not like not like you're trying to like solicit work from somebody, then that's going to be a much quality friendship person to know. If
Yeah.
business comes out of that, then that's kind of a like a like like a byproduct of that relationship. The relationship in and of itself is the thing that is really what you want, because this is the person that you bonded with, and is a you want. I would rather, regardless of whether work came out of that relationship, I'd rather choose a relationship over the project.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like, the former coworkers that had gone other places. It's like you weren't thinking, how am I going to utilize this later on down my career, and ask them, you know, for favors, like I'm not, you weren't thinking about that when you just befriended them at that job. So it's kind of like the same sort of mindset. Like, how can I just improve my network, become, friends with more people, connect with people, uh, and be real with them and build on that.
Yeah, 100%. That's just and it's still the way it's provided. It's harder doing it through like a video screen these days, because like it's I can't take you out for a drink after this call to like get to know you a little better. But those are to me, that's where the magic happens. Like I love being able to like meet with people and chat over things that aren't necessarily work, or if they are work related, it's just fun stuff without any like ulterior motives. Like you're just chatting about whatever the state of the industry is today with front end frameworks or whatever it might be.
Yeah. To that, I mean, you mentioned that you were doing the Martha stuff, and you still do some of that type of stuff. Do you have like a specific, um, I don't know, like what's your zone of genius? Like, is there a particular industry you like working in, or a particular type of work you prefer to do, like within front end development?
Yeah. So the idea of going into front end dev and front end design as a like a business strategy worked and still works. More so 13 years ago it did, because front end was like niche back then, so it was really important that we kind of honed in on a specific niche service. And that's been great, because like we've been managed to gather a great team of senior front end devs and designers, and for the most part, the majority of the work that we do is like 90% all front end. There's a lot of CMS work and some DevOps work that kind of comes along with that, but we still remain focused solely on front end. But over the years, like the bifurcation of like front end and back end has gotten muddied, and so there's like a lot of Node.js stuff that's like kind of considered back end now, but it's really technically front end. And as we've gotten as the company grew, and the types of inquiries were coming in, we kind of had to start to divide up, like, all right, these are like B2B marketing type sites that we don't really like. A lot of WordPress type sites, and maybe some of the smaller ones, there's other organizations that specialize in those types of things. And while we're capable of doing it, it didn't necessarily fit within the core services that we want to provide, that the team was really good at, the skills that they possessed. So over the years, we've always wanted to ensure that if it was CMS projects, that we were nailing that front end portion of it. But a lot of the work that we do today is mainly design systems oriented. So, I mean, 10 years ago, we were building component libraries, and it was just like component library after component library after component library. And then we would hand it over to one of the in-house team, or the in-house team for the client that we're working with. And then they would usually hook it up to their CMS or wherever those components would end up landing. And, and then over time, now we're working in Storybook, and we're doing larger scale design systems. So that's of all the types of projects that we work on, those are the ones that we're most equipped for, and the ones that we like doing the most. And then on the other side of that is going to be, we do a lot of API driven, decoupled, headless type work with various CMSs, including WordPress and Sanity and Contentful and all of those types of the CMSs that are equipped for decoupled architectures. But we do a lot of API-driven work where we work with Salesforce and CRM APIs, building dashboards and authenticated experiences, and a lot of kind of complex front-endy stuff like that.
Cool. So how do you, I mean, over the years, you said you've been at this, do you say 14 years? So you
Going on
said
13.
13 years. Um, yeah, I mean, how have you seen things evolve? Maybe a better question is, as an agency, like how do you feel like you've had to adapt? Have you noticed any sort of specific um, kind of points where you had to, you learned really quickly, or something like that, where you've had to, I don't know, learn a lesson one way or the other?
Um, I mean, in 13 years, like the front end industry, the technology within 13 years have evolved so much because the tools that are created are to be able to be more efficient and create optimal front end code, and those tools create other tools, and then it just keeps on. It's this giant Voltron of snap together frameworks. But in the beginning, like it was like Scriptaculous and all these like pre jQuery things that we're using like before. So like in the beginning, it was like vanilla. Most of the evolution came with CSS3, and then moving up CSS specs for all the later things like grid and the big milestones within CSS specs. But then with JavaScript, it seemed like there was just all these different avenues that were going down. At the time, when you're like positioning yourself as a front end lead company, it's hard to just like pick one and run with it and say, all right, we're going all in on Angular. Angular is going to be our thing, and it's great. I mean, it probably would have behooved us if we did that back then, but we tried to just kind of like hold back and see where trends were going and in what direction things were going in. So like throughout the beginning, we just kind of went with whatever worked best, the tools that worked best for the project that we're working on. Still to this day, we still do that, because one of the awesome things about working for an agency is that we get to kind of test out a lot of these different new technologies and then ensure that we're using the right tool for the right project. But over the years, there's definitely been some milestones. I would say, like the downward trajectory of jQuery, the upward trajectory of front end libraries like React, and back then before that we're using like Backbone, and then we got a little bit into Angular for a little bit, but then Vue we got into a little bit for a little bit, and now we do a little bit of Svelte, which is sometimes we build like if it's a server side site that we're building, we'll build some applications built in Svelte to nest in those pages. But the biggest thing that we use these days are web components. So native web components is the majority of all the design systems that we build. And then we end up building these like front-end wrappers, if you will. Like, so the production part of that would be built in React or do a Svelte version or Angular version. But those are I feel like the culmination of all the various libraries and frameworks that have come out. That's been like the explosion, and then which one to go with, and like who's doing what, and understanding which one's the best tool for the project, the requirements of that project. It's stressful to keep up with it all.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah.
But
Well,
but
I
it's
guess,
fun to play with them all too. So if it's like once you learn one, you
yeah.
kind of get the gist of how a lot of the other ones work. But then when you're faced with the requirements of the project, it's like, all right, which direction am I going to go here? And then we start thinking about the team that we're building it for, like who's going to inherit this, and what are their skill sets, what are their expertise, and then we try to adapt to that. That's kind of been the focal point of like how we get to pick and choose the types of technology we use on projects.
Yeah. Well, maybe you can unpack that a little bit more. I think, when you have somebody first come to you, there's probably a certain sort of approach that you bring to the table. When they say, "Oh, well, here's kind of what we want in the end," and you probably have a certain sort of like, "Okay, here's how we're going to kind of draw out exactly the best way to craft that." How do you think about um, kind of, I guess, solving the problem of like they have a particular outcome you want? How do you approach that?
So are you saying like they come to us with a problem, and then like we start to come up with like a technical architecture for their solution?
Yeah, like I guess what is your approach to um, yeah, I guess repeating. You're working with multiple clients. There's probably some patterns to, every client that we work with. We're trying to go through steps A, B, and C in order to make sure that we're building the right thing. So I guess like, what does that look like for you guys?
It's hard to say because like every most of the projects we do, well, I'll take a step back. There's a portion of projects that we work on that are like we have boilerplates for 'em. So like starter kits, things that certain design systems that fall within a certain pattern, then we have like a storybook starter kit that we work with. If there's a decoupled site that's using Next.js and we don't know what the CMS is yet, then we have like a little starter kit for that. If it's like a WordPress site that comes kind of similar, then we have a starter kit for that. So those are the things that kind of help us get like 20 to 35% of the way there. So like a lot of that stuff that we need is already built into those. So we'll kind of pull that out of our repo, clone it, and then do what we need to start making the project. But the rest of the types of projects that we get in, they either come with information that we need to adapt to, so or like they come with technologies that we need to be able to we have to know and understand it and work within. So a lot of times we do team augmentation. So if there's a team that we're kind of placing ourselves within, then we have to ensure that the resources that we're putting on that team are familiar with the technology that they're using. So if it's going to be like Angular and Gatsby or whatever it might be, then we will make sure that whoever we're appointing to that project are the ones that we have that are most comfortable using that technology. And then there's other ones where we'll get the requirements for our project and we're told this might not be team augmentation project, it's a brand new net new project, but they already know the types of technology that they need on that. So then it's a similar one like with team augmentation. We grab the resources that are most familiar with that technology and then appoint them to it. The fun ones are the ones where it's like it's more kind of arbitrary. It's a little vague, where it's like they're presenting us with problems. They're like, we need a way to we have one nearshore, one offshore team. One team is skilled in React, the other team is skilled in vanilla JavaScript, and we already have a design system that's built in React. We need to refactor it to build a web components version because we want to be able to snap on other frameworks later to be able to work with another team that maybe skilled in Ember.js or something. So
Mhm.
that gives us like a couple of ideas of what we're going to be working with. Now we know the skill sets of the teams, like the consuming teams that we're going to be working with eventually. So then we can map out the plan of exactly like what the technical architecture for this particular project is going to end up looking like.
Yeah. So you're kind of starting with the end in mind. It's like, okay, here's who's going to use this. Here's what you're trying to the destination is. Now let's figure out kind of the best way to get there.
Yeah, it's the we do this with like editors and CMSs too. It's like the audience who's consuming the site and the content that the editors are typing into the CMS in order for them to consume that content are just as important because it's their jobs, especially if it's like larger digital publication type sites where there's multiple, maybe sometimes hundreds of editors creating content in these CMSs. So we try to focus really hard, and so we do a lot of stakeholder discovery on the audience part, but we do a lot of discovery on the internal team, the people who are working in those content management systems. So that way we can create the most intuitive content model for those systems. We do similar things on projects that aren't CMS related. So we want to talk to the teams that'll be there when we're gone using the product that we're building. So it's like, all right, so what good is it if we build this giant React component library design system where nobody knows React and everybody's, I mean, they would likely stop us before we get to the point we finish the project. But like, it's important to scan the room and go, okay, so this is you. Where do you see them? Are you hiring more team members who are going to be more React developers? Because we want to be able to adapt to your skill sets and your expertise. And that way at the end, we're all satisfied with the product.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned earlier on, um, network has been how you grew in the early days, and I mean, still, and to a large degree today. If you're thinking about like how you're going to go and get your next client, would it be that network, or Do you feel like things have changed enough that like you have a different approach these days?
Um, like we've so we don't do much like lead gen marketing or anything. And I have like a love hate relationship with it. I've never gotten past the point personally, like for like me, it just feels it's a hard task for me to take on, like like cold calling somebody, or I know how it feels when I get it because it feels disingenuous, it feels unauthentic, and then I'm just another number in like the 7,000 fanned out templated emails that were AI generated, and it just for me it doesn't feel like I can't connect with this person. It goes back to what I was saying about like physically being with people and then making connections that are honest, truthful, transparent connections that you know that I can trust this person and that person will be accountable to you. When it's coming through cold emails, and I know things are different now because of it's just personal communicate like physically being around each other just is less now than it was 4 years ago. But I've never been one to be able to successfully like scout a certain person to say like that's the guy or that's the company that I really want to target, and then figure out how to write the most like worded perfectly friendly, just amount of sales, but just amount of friendly email to be able to, because as much as you want to write that email and convince yourself that it's not meant to be sales, you know that you are doing this in order for 3 months from now to generate some sort of sale. And I just can't. I can't get past that part. And this is probably the conflicting business person in me when I've kind of made the transition from being like a lead designer and dev to a CEO. But so we work with other people. We work with other organizations to help us with that part, and then see how that goes. The one of the initiatives that we're trying to do right now is to try to make Southleft a little less owner led, because like the if everything's attached to me, then how valuable is the company Southleft? But right
Mhm.
now, the majority of the work that does come in is through referrals. So we don't have to do. Fortunately, we don't have to do a lot of outbound marketing. It's our if we're friendly and honest and we do good work and people enjoy working with us, then the hopes are that you go tell a friend and that person tells a friend, and then the just kind of the ripple effect of referrals happens, and then that's the way business comes in. Most of the business comes in through cold inquiries. A lot of them come in through like stupid stuff I post on LinkedIn. So like posting just ridiculous non-business related things. I'll get a DM and somebody's like, "Hey, I saw you posted something about something," or like they'll dig back in my post and say something, and a lot of that pans out, and or it turns into a referral, or it turns into like I know a person who just checked out your website. This person needs a feature built for their site, and then an introduction will happen, and then so on and so on. So and there's no
Yeah.
like one method that works best,
Yeah.
or it really depends on like the season and like what I'm feeling that day.
Well, it seems like that kind of goes back to that earlier principle of just kind of being your whole self and being kind of open and honest. So, whether it's at a hotel bar, at a conference, or it's on your social media profile on LinkedIn, it's like your potential clients could be also on that platform, but you're not actively trying to pitch them or something like that on social. You're just kind of on maybe showing your expertise or something like that, and that's the extent of it. And then they know, they see you and they're like, oh, this is somebody who does what I need.
Yeah, yeah, and that's right. And those people, I guess I wouldn't. I don't. I mean, technically, I guess it's through something that I did, and they've done the due diligence to either review the website or look at some past posts or whatever else that whatever Southwest has contributed to, and then decided to inquire, whether it's through a DM or through the form on the website, and then I try as hard with those inbound kind of cold inbound leads to approach the introduction calls with those from a standpoint of I'm not here to make a sale. Like obviously I want to hear them out because they're inquiring about some need about some web service that we provide. But even then, the first 10 minutes of that call is probably just chatting about nothing, like what'd you have for lunch today, and or like something that happened with the weather here, or like, I didn't get much sleep last night because my kids were up, or just stuff like that. And then more often than not, you kind of find a common bond, and then that's the string that I like to latch onto, and then make sure that remains the thing that connects us first. And then if business comes out of that, cool. If it doesn't, then that's fine too. At least I've made a new contact, and now I can check in every once in a while and see how you doing and how the kids are doing, and is it still freezing in Minnesota or whatever we talked about.
Yeah, well, that makes a lot of sense. Well, I guess one of the last questions I have for you is looking forward, like as far as where I mean, you've been at it for a while now, um, but there's also, the years ahead. Do you have any particular goals in mind for the agency, for yourself and the agency? Are you the sort of person who's, setting specific sort of growth goals and you're trying to do like engineer your growth, or is it more, it sounds like, it seems like you're a very relational person. So maybe it's a little more organic, but can you just kind of, I guess, talk about where you see the future of the agency?
Yeah. So we do EOS for, you probably, have you heard of that
Yeah.
project,
Yeah.
operational architecture methodology. So there are documented 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 10 year plans. But I could say it's not approached like a typical money grab, get bigger, more bigger clients, grow the team kind of stuff. Like I like the progression of things happening organically, because I think it frees up. I don't want to live a stressful life. I like authentically enjoy what I do. Like I wouldn't be doing this for 13 years with all the ups and downs and keeping up with this fast paced industry if I didn't love it. So I'm not in any hurry to get out of it. And I don't want to get to the point where like I don't know the last names of anybody on my team. I want us all to be profitable. And if anything, I'd want to stick to like being almost like boutique size, but just with a handful of really, really good high end clients that like understand and appreciate the value of our work, and who I know personally. That's like the dream. Like I don't have any aspirations to be like the next Wyden Kennedy, or Greg, or just like Ogilvy, anything like that.
Yeah.
I want to be well known for being a pioneer in the front end realm, and having an amazing team that shares that love for front end design and development, and works a fulfilling and stressless job. Like that if we can like create that perfect culture and harmony within this organization, then that's success. Not like having
Yeah.
150 people on payroll and making 150 million a year.
Yeah. More of a quality of life, not a quantity of life sort
Yeah,
of approach,
exactly.
for sure. Well, honestly, this has been great. I've loved all your answers, and I think you shared a lot of wisdom. For people who want to stay in touch with you, follow some of your sayings and things like that online, what's the best way for people to touch base with you and learn more about Southleft and you as a person?
Yeah, sure. LinkedIn. If you're on LinkedIn, feel free to connect with me. I connect with most people, even if I don't know you. And DMs, my DMs are open on LinkedIn, so feel free to contact me. If you want to know about more of our services in projects that we've worked on, you can go to southleft.com. It's southleft.com. And then if you want to inquire about anything, feel free to use the form on the site, or LinkedIn DM is fine too.
Awesome. Well, TJ, thanks again for coming on the show and kind of sharing some of your journey. I definitely learned a lot. So thanks so much.
Excellent. Yeah, thanks for having me, David. I appreciate it.